So welcome everybody back to Stony Creek Revival, the Jazz Edition. So first of all, we want to thank everybody who has listened to the last 10 weeks or so, 11 if you count the origin video. And now, as we said, we were going to be moving into a whole new direction with these jazz videos. So the question that might be asked is, how in the world did we go from the honky-tonk stuff of the Blondes, Baseball, and Beer to the jazz project, which will now be called Amazon by Dawn? Amazon by Dawn because the Amazon River is in Brazil, and I love bossa nova music, and there is some bossa nova music that's going to be on this video.
You know what they say about bossa nova?
You got to blame it on it? Okay, all right. So first of all, I want to thank Mark and Gordon basically for supporting me, because they weren't involved in this project, very little, just actually by inspiration. But why it is that we're doing this is a couple different reasons. Because if you remember some of the previous videos, we had talked about how when COVID hit in 2020, it shut down all of our gigs. And so when we stopped performing as a live unit, we're all trapped like rats in our house, then I started to revisit recording again. And as we started to come out of COVID, you know, for more than 40 years, I had played in cover bands. I don't know how many times I played Sweet Home Alabama and how many times I played Johnny Be Good and all of these other songs. And I like all of those songs, but I really wanted to do some of my own stuff. And what was near and dear to my heart was some of these jazz influenced songs that I had. So then that begs the question, how is it that when we've talked about the country and rock and roll roots that we had, that I deviated into jazz? So we got to back up just a little bit. So first of all, these guys, Gordon and I especially, but it really includes Mark and really everybody, we all grow up in the cultural milieu that is part of our youth. And then we are also highly influenced by the musical predilections of our parents.
Look at you.
I practiced that word, predilection.
Google it.
So we started working on that, but then shortly after our childhood, or actually it was really during our childhood, we became very influenced by our older cousins. Now, you've heard us talk a lot about Glenn in this video. We got Glenn right here in that picture.
The lurker.
So Glenn and also his older brother Bob. And really, Bob was the Pied Piper at that time. And we thought that they were super cool for a couple reasons. Number one, they were older than us. And number two, they seemed a little bit more sophisticated. And they lived in L.A.
Yeah,
and we lived up here in the sticks in Northern California. And to kind of describe our childhoods, is we would go down to their house multiple times a year, and we'd go to Disneyland, we'd go to Redondo Beach, and we'd go to Universal Studios, and then they would come up to our house, and we'd go to the creek and catch tadpoles, or
Stony Creek,
or go into the orchards and throw olives at each other. But I think that we all appreciated, the different view of life that each family had. So anyway, but at that time, our cousin Bob was hugely into rock and roll. And we would go down there and we'd be playing board games, Risk and Monopoly or cards or whatever. And the record player would have the Beatles. It would have the Rolling Stones. It would have Aerosmith. It would have Mott the Hoople. Led Zeppelin, Montrose.
Yes.
So, those were the things that we became influenced.
And occasionally Elton John.
And that's right. They were big Elton John
Though
fans.
He would deny that later on.
So anyway, that would happen for several years, but then at some point, and I should say that we were all firmly in the disco sucks, movement, at that time. But then what happened is that Glenn finally overthrew his tyrannical older brother, and he decided, you know what, I like How Deep Is Your Love by the Beach Boys, and I like Undercover Angel.
Bee Gees.
What did I say? Beach. You're right. It was the Bee Gees.
Correction.
Good catch.
Yeah, that is a good catch.
That's what I'm here for.
And then he started to become influenced by a lot of other different type of music, and moved away from that rock and roll. And so,
although he did go Elvis Costello.
He did. That was a little bit later, but he went through that hard phase in the late 70s, early 80s. And then when he moved up to Northern California where we were, he started playing me some stuff, and he broke out 2 albums which were really changed my life in many ways. And one was Larry Carlton's first Warner Brother album, which is the one that had Rio Samba and it had Room 335 and Pointed Up and all of that. And the other one was George Benson's album Breezin'. Now, yeah.
Benson.
And so when he played me the song Affirmation off the George Benson album, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And then all of a sudden I was hooked. And then something else happened right around that same time. So this is right around 1980. So first of all, my brother leaves home. So he moves away. And then we have...
I'm the last barrier to the disco and jazz influences that I was blocking, but I went and things went downhill.
So he was gone. And then we also had another guitar player, Steve Valenzuela, who later went on to be a very successful producer in his own right. I think he worked with Tony Bennett, and a lot of other people down there. And then finally our cousin Glenn moved back down to LA, which left me and Mark. So you had a bass player and a drummer, which is not much of a band, So I started playing guitar at that time and taking guitar
lessons. Wasn't that Mark
lessons.
Cook's Pure Percussion Band?
That
was one iteration of it. That's right. Anyway, so then I started going headline.
Concussion.
Oh, okay. I wasn't around.
Yeah, we had a total of 2 gigs. That's all right. So then I started going headlong into all of these guys, Larry Carlton and Steve Kahn and David Spinoza and Mike Stern and Jeff Beck and Al Di Meola and all of those guys. Now, it's a little bit embarrassing to be playing this record because it's one thing to play some country licks, but I am so very aware that I am not in those guys' league. They are so much better than I am. They were better than I was even at that time, when I was probably at my peak in my early 20s. But I still loved the music, and I loved all of this jazz music, and it was something that was important for me to get out. And the thing about jazz music is that, because it turns a lot of people off, but, like you look at rock and roll. Now, the Beach Boys, the Herman's Hermits, and the Monkees are rock and roll. And so is Van Halen and Megadeth and Ozzy Osbourne.
I'm surprised you knew Megadeth. I'm pretty impressed.
I have heard of them. And so it's the same thing with jazz because I've tried to like the really free-form stuff, and I don't like it. It's really more instrumental rock, I guess that you could call it, is what I like. But we're going to go ahead and go through a series of 12 jazz songs, or jazz-ish songs that I've had written. And that's what's going to be coming up. Oh, I should say in this song, the first song that we're going to be playing is called Cavorting in the Cabana. And it is all done, I did all of the instruments except for the saxophone. So we have a very great saxophone player from Chico named Frank Eller, and he's the one who did Chico, California. He's the one who did the saxophone on this. So I don't know if there's anything that you guys want to say or comment on that.
Well, just one little thing is we have many fans out there.
We do.
And one in particular was kind of offended that in our last segment of music or commentary, Matthew was kind of painted in a bad painting as not liking a certain musician named Neil Young. Well, just to set the record straight, so we don't want to offend anybody, Matthew, how do you feel about Neil Young truly? How do you feel?
Okay, so Neil Young has kind of become a running joke between my brother and I. He played me a song back in the 90s called Farmer John by Neil Young. And I hated that song then. I hate that song now. I re-listened to it today to remind myself of how much I hate it. And there were some of the other songs, the real country rock was in the early 70s. That was a little bit before my time, and it wasn't really my thing. But I love Harvest Moon. I think that Southern Man and Keep on Rockin' in the Free World are they still make the hairs on my arms raise. So I don't hate Neil Young. But it's like a lot of artists. The Beach Boys are the same things. Good Vibrations and Please Let Me Wonder and Fun, Fun, Fun. I love all of those songs. But they laid some eggs too. And Neil, you laid a couple eggs.
So there you have it. So if you like what we're doing and you want to go on this ride with us, then you know what? Rock our subscribe bar and give us a thumbs up and ring our bell because
we not another nickel.